I'm going to go ahead and introduce Michelle Haub, our speaker today. Very excited to introduce her. There she is. Hi, Michelle. Michelle earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from Fort Hays State University. Her professional certifications include LSVT Loud and Speak Out. Michelle has worked with individuals with speech, language, hearing, swallowing, voice, and memory deficits for 25 years. And Michelle is the co-creator and director of the Meadowlark Parkinson's program in Manhattan, Kansas. So a few more highlights in 2019, so last year, she received the honors of the Association Award from the Kansas Speech Language Hearing Association. In 2014, the Meadowlark Parkinson's program received the Excellence in Social Accountability Award from Leading Age Kansas. And then this year, the Meadowlark Parkinson's program received a Parkinson's Foundation Community Grant for I Can with PD, Confidence About Nutrition, Swallowing, Activities of Daily Living, and Emotional Well-Being educational series. So with that, please join me in welcoming Michelle Haub.
Hi there, and thank you so very much, Sarah, for that introduction. And I will share my screen with you now as well. There we go. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Okay. So first of all, just to begin here, I do not have any financial disclosures to release. The objectives for today are looking at a greater understanding of communication challenges that are associated with speech, facial masking, anxiety, and isolation. Also, we will be talking about techniques, treatments, and therapies that help someone with Parkinson's overcome these challenges of communication. And finally, we'll talk about some strategies to optimize communication, strengthen your relationships, and encourage people with Parkinson's to be your very own best advocate. So let's start off with talking about communication challenges. I want to break it down into two separate areas. And looking at that, I want to talk about the outward symptoms. What is it that people are seeing when they want to communicate with someone with Parkinson's? And one of the first things that people will talk about is the facial masking. So where we look at someone and we don't see quite the emotions and feelings that individuals with Parkinson's are experiencing because of rigidity and decreased facial movement that allow them to smile and show how they're feeling. Also, an outward symptom that we see from Parkinson's is that speech and voice changes. So this can be seen through a quiet voice, a hoarse voice, mumbled speech, or fast speech, and sometimes even the slower speech. These things are what people see, and this is what makes it difficult sometimes for others to want to communicate or to feel like they're getting back from the person with Parkinson's. So when we look at the communication challenges from the non-motor symptoms, we're going to be thinking about pragmatics. And what I mean by this is basically, how do we turn take? So if a person with Parkinson's is slower to respond, or if they need to have something repeated, this can slow down or even interrupt those interchanges and those interactions with people. We also are dealing with apathy, anxiety, and/or depression. These are all symptoms of the disease that can really impact how a person with Parkinson's engages with others, has the desire to want to engage with others, or has the ability to focus on other individuals. When a person is feeling apathy, no matter how much they want to, no matter how much their desire is to communicate with others or to go to a voice class or to a choir, if that apathy sets in, it's really hard to actually make that happen. Same thing goes with the anxiety and the depression. So it's something that care partners really need to be aware of and help communicate and work together with that person with Parkinson's to find strategies that will allow them to engage despite these three non-motor symptoms. Embarrassment and isolation is another big thing here. And as you can tell just from that first slide of those outward symptoms of facial masking and difficulties being clear in your communication, whether it's a voice, a speech, or a language challenge, people who have Parkinson's are very likely to feel embarrassed about the way that they're communicating now, especially for people who are maybe even younger or have significant career backgrounds where they have been very vocal throughout their lives. That embarrassment can cause someone to become isolated. They don't want to step out and feel those critiques or those criticisms that may or may not be there from others. And ultimately, all of these things can lead to loneliness. So, as just kind of a practical example for you, I wanted to take this and just break it down and show you how this is just a constant cycle. So if we look at those outward and non-motor symptoms that we were just discussing, an example is that outward motor quiet voice leads to isolation. When we're isolated, we're not talking as much, we're not practicing our speech. So then when we do want to speak again, then it can lead to mumbled speech. So that's really the key here, is that I want you just to be aware of those outward symptoms and those non-motor symptoms cycling through and creating a perpetual cycle. That doesn't mean that you have to live with that, however. So where do you go from here? Number one thing, as a speech language pathologist, I'm always going to recommend that you talk with your physician or your neurologist and you get that referral to a speech language pathologist. One of the best programs out there with years and years of research is the LSVT program. And I have the initials ENT in here because it's important that you also see an ear, nose, and throat doctor or an otolaryngologist before beginning any programs, because you don't want to have a physiological problem, maybe a vocal nodule or something else that could actually be causing your voice problems, that then you don't get that addressed and you work on your loud voice and you just exacerbate those physical problems there. The other thing that you can do with the speech language pathologist is work on your language and conversation. And I also really want to highlight working with a counselor. When you think back on those slides of non-motor, almost every single one of them can be addressed by working closely with a counselor in talk therapy, working on meditation, working on ways to talk to yourself and work through those things that are causing isolation or embarrassment and how to deal with those. These two things paired together are a wonderful duo. So some techniques for engagement, techniques and ways to be engaged. I'd like to challenge you to think about being loud. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, if I just think about what I want to say, people understand me pretty well. And that, in a nutshell, is exactly what you're doing when you're working with Parkinson's. When you want to get up and go for a walk, you have to think about every step that you're going to take. You have to think about that effort that it takes to get up and going. And the same thing happens with your voice. So making sure that you're thinking about being loud. And sometimes your body wants to give you cues that you're already too loud or you're yelling. You gotta ignore that. Gauge it off of your listeners instead of what you feel like, because your sensory system will try to fool you. Another thing is to just talk. Set specific times every day to engage with others. This not only is going to help your voice, but it's also going to help your mood and the way in which you feel. Read aloud. Think about finding poems that you enjoy. Read books. Read a newspaper article. Anything you can get your hands on in print, just take time every day to read aloud. It's a great thing to read to grandchildren, especially during these times of COVID. Pull up on FaceTime or Zoom and read those books to those grandkids. Volunteer. Do this for a school district as well, where you zoom in and you can read a story to a preschool. Sing. Think about hooking up to Spotify or Pandora, where you can pop in with all of your favorite playlists and your favorite songs, and then you can sing all day long. Sing while you're cleaning, sing while you're doing anything else around the house, or going for a walk. And then, of course, you can also do choirs, and some online choirs are available as well. And lastly, engage. Engage with your friends, your family, your community, and don't let that stop because of these isolation times that we're having because of COVID. There are many programs online that still allow you the opportunity to be able to engage with others. So in closing, I just would like to encourage you to be your own best advocate. No one knows you better than you. Express yourself and practice expressing yourself before you have something big to do. For example, practice what you want to say to your neurologist before you go, and practice using your loud voice to do that. It may be a little slower, softer, or less clear than you would like, but you need to be the one sharing your thoughts, ideas, and questions. It is wonderful and it is perfectly fabulous to share these thoughts and feelings with your care partners, but it's also really important for you to continue that open dialogue throughout the disease process, because your feelings and your ideas may change over time, but you have to be the one to be your own best advocate and share with your care partner and share with others. It's never too early, nor is it ever too late to start therapy. We have seen progress with people in all different stages of the disease process. So don't wait too long, and you can never start too early. Keep doing what you love. Find modifications for those things that you love. But if you can find that inner joy in singing, in reading, in talking to people on the phone, then you can continue to keep those engagements and work on both your non-motor and your motor skills. So I'd like to just end here with a quote from Muhammad Ali. Give me 1 second here. It's the repetition of affirmations that leads to belief. And once that belief becomes a deep conviction, things begin to happen. So no matter what your affirmations are, try to remember they will become a belief. Keep those affirmations positive, be in control of what you can control, and do all that you can to live a better life with Parkinson's. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle, for sharing that expertise with us and this wonderful presentation. So now we'd like to hear from people living with Parkinson's and a care partner about their challenges with communication and how they overcome those challenges through interventional therapies and support from their loved ones. So Michelle and team, take it away.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Sarah, for that. And I'm really excited to have all of you here with us today. So I'd like to just have each of you share a little bit about who you are and your journey of getting here with us today.
Great. Who's starting?
John, let's go ahead, or sorry, JM and Heidi, let's start with you guys.
I'm JM Kenny, and this is my lovely wife, Heidi. And I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2012. And for about, I was a producer in the entertainment industry. A lot of the things that you talked about, Michelle, were all things that I was checking off that I needed to do, that I had to use my voice, had to feel my facial expressions, to help emphasize whatever point I was trying to make. And when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I kind of went inside and kind of gave up. For 5 years, the only person I spoke to that was remotely close to Parkinson's was my doctor. And it wasn't until my wife said to me, you need to get out, you need to exercise, you need to find different modalities that help you in discovering what the rest of your life is going to be. And she encouraged me and somewhat pushed me to join neuroboxing. And I joined neuroboxing, which is a boxing modality out here in Los Angeles area. And it works the physical as well as the cognitive. And through that, I started to realize that if you don't ask the question, nobody's going to tell you the answer. You have to ask your physicians, you have to ask your friends, but more importantly, you have to create a community, which you spoke about, of Parkinson's. And I try to explain to people that when I walk into that boxing gym, I'm no longer the quote unquote oddball or the person that's different than everybody else. I'm with my tribe, and the people that are sitting on the sidelines are the outsiders, because we all know how we feel. We all know what we're going through. We help each other out. We educate each other on the advancement. And our counselors, our team of Jennifer and Josh at Neuroboxing have created that environment, that safe environment for us to be at. So, externally, I found a second care partner, but the original care partner is right here, and the motivator of what I do every day.
Wonderful.
There's a lead in.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Heidi Kenny. I'm JM's wife, mother of 2 beautiful teenage girls. And I'm excited to be here to talk with everybody. My day job and my night job is to be with this guy and really just offer support where I can. I work at an integrative medical clinic in Montrose called Oasis Family Medicine. I'm a patient advocate there. And I also train internal development and meditation program. So yeah, that's me. And I'm here because of JM. He has really just stepped forward into grabbing hold of what's out there to support people that have been diagnosed with Parkinson's. So that's what brought me here today.
I mean, one final note, Michelle, is that what I've learned from Heidi is that if me as the patient or us as the patients don't care for ourselves, there's not going to be anybody that's going to care for us. So it starts and stops with us, even though we feel we're incapable of doing certain things or we're not necessarily sure. We have to try to find a way to care for ourselves. And that's why a group like Neuroboxing or the choir or anything that gets you in a community and a community of like-minded people is even better, but it allows you to really see what you can do as opposed to what you can't do.
Yes, that's wonderful, JM. And one thing I just want to highlight, JM, is I found it very wonderful that when you started speaking about who you are when you walk in that boxing gym, you sat up really tall and straight, and you totally took on that persona of being the fighter and being your own best advocate. That was really powerful. I hope others were able to catch that too. It was really neat. So thank you both for sharing. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll move on to Kathleen. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Kathleen Reynolds, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2015. That was after I've tried everything to straighten up my left eye twitching and my left cheek cramping. That was my original symptoms, but I did not know that at that time. But 2014, I went in for the microvascular decompression brain surgery to help that hemifacial spasm. And after that, my physical therapist, who was trying to help me regain my balance, said after a year of trying, she says, I think you better go see a movement disorder doctor. That was when I went to see the doctor, and he was diagnosed me with Parkinson's. So this was all the build up to Parkinson's. That's what I had. And after I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I try to find out everything about what I need to do for Parkinson's other than medication. I found out about rock steady boxing, which is just like JM said about the boxing community. It was really good. And then I started losing my balance more, and my walking gaits was very difficult. And then my husband was always helping me with my walking and getting to places. That was very helpful. but then I have at that time already quit my church choir, which I have been with for 20 years. And I was starting to, now last couple of months, I started to lose my voice and the length of my sentences. I couldn't speak a long sentence or express myself fully because my voice was going, or that I couldn't hold on to my breath or something. So and I read about it, and I found out I should have not have quit my choir, because that was what's important for my voice to retain itself. So now I'm trying to find some ways to keep my voice going and to keep this masked face from looking mad all the time. I think I look like I'm mad all the time, and I don't like that idea, because I really am a very happy person. But then I can't, I like that idea of the Rock Steady Boxing, but then the Rock Steady Boxing group has moved away, and I have not been able to go back to them. But that is a great feeling, to be with a group of people who are like you and who are supporting each other and giving each other moral support as far as our advances and our trial and tribulation with the new medication or stuff like that. That was very important to me too. So
Yes.
That's my story, I guess.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing, Kathleen. And remember, it's never too late to get back into things. So you can get back into that choir and singing, and you'll just keep plugging right away.
I have to find a choir, yeah, because I cannot sing in the church choir because of the procession.
Yes, yes, and the
yeah.
COVID situation makes things tricky too now. But
Yeah.
there are some virtual options, and we can talk more about that here in just a little bit. Thank you, Kathleen.
Sure. Absolutely.
So
Kathleen, I can help you if you offline if you want to know how to get LinkedIn, because of COVID, the blessing in COVID is that we've all figured out how to do our boxing in our own homes.
Really?
And we all communicate, so that we can talk after. I don't want to take your time.
That's a great suggestion. Excellent suggestion. Great. And then we'll move on to John. John, can you share with us a little bit about your story, please?
Yes, my name is John Humphreys. I live in Canton, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. And I was diagnosed about 12 years ago. And I'll never forget the day I was diagnosed. The doctor told me I had Parkinson's. And I said, that's for old people. He said, well, I got two things to tell you now. You are old and you have Parkinson's. So, and I went through the normal depression state, hid it from everybody for a while, and then I decided I went to a conference one time. It was a Parkinson Foundation conference down by the Atlanta airport, and I met somebody who to this day is a very good friend of mine, and I asked him how to get involved. He said, get involved in advocacy. And so I've kind of devoted my time totally to advocacy. I do a lot of different things. I work a lot with Annie Long at the Parkinson Foundation here in Atlanta. I'm on the patient advisory board for the Udall Center of Excellence at Emory University. I'm a clinical trial ambassador. I just finished my over 300 clinical trials I've done in 12 years. Matter of fact, I'm going to Emory tomorrow to do one I'm working on right now. And I'm also a patient advocate, or a full advocate for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And I'm the graceful person last year at the conference in Washington, D.C. that fell in the morning of the first morning in the shower and broke my pelvis and right arm. So I'm kind of famous for being graceful in that respect. But how I got involved with this meeting here is I was talking to Annie Long one day about how the confusion of masks, how nobody knows how to wear a mask, and you get home one day, like I went to Costco, Annie and myself, favorite store, and they had two of these masks that you could buy, and you were the kind you put in water and you squeezed out and you pull it up, and then I get home that day, and they say those are the worst things to wear. And then, now everybody's getting a fashion statement over this. I love baseball. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan. I got my Cubs mask, but these aren't worth a darn either, And then they say the ones with the portholes that I bought 3 months ago are no good anymore. So, and then you get cloth masks and they don't fit, or they get, it's hot and everything. So it was very, very confusing. And how I got involved with this, because I was in sales all of my life, and I realized that if I lost my voice, my whole life would be worse than having Parkinson's. So I was very fond of the LSVT Loud and Cynthia Fox at LSVT, And I did this thing, and I still to this day, I do a lot with the LSVT, and what I found is very helpful, and Annie was pretty, as I told her about it yesterday, I actually got a decibel meter on my phone. And when I'm sitting around doing nothing, watching TV, which I've seen, during the COVID, I've seen every episode of LSV or Law and Order SVU 35,000 episode 35,000 times. I'll practice, and I put a decibel meter on my phone, and I'll do some talking from the LSVT, and Michelle could tell you about this also. That the one thing I remember is the 10 statements you repeat over and over and over again. And how that all started is somebody once told me that I was getting quiet, and then I noticed that my enunciation was not good. I was just like streamlined through something, like say, I got to go to the store today and buy some milk. And so I learned to pronounce and enunciate my words better. And with this decibel meter, that helped me keep to 80 and 85 decibels. And I have to still to this day use the 10 statements that I did the LSVT, the original, 3 years ago. And I'll say those over and over and over again, and I always, the meter will register the decibels, and you can tell that you're doing the right volume. So I found that very, very helpful. But as far as the mask, I think this is going to be a real issue because, first of all, you go to a store today, and it's some young person, they don't talk loud as it is, and we're getting older and we're losing our hearing, and you're mumbling through that mask, and then you end up you both pull the mask down, you're breathing on each other. So what is that? It's very, very confusing. And then on top of it, you don't know what kind of mask to wear. So I thought of myself to do my part would be to make sure that my voice is always enunciating words properly and at the proper volume to help and to keep the line of communication. Because I tell you, I've noticed that so much that you go to a restaurant, fast food like a Subway or and you order, and they're behind the counter there and they're talking, and their voice is so soft under that mask, and you're almost up to their ear, up to the mask to hear them. So that's what I found is very, very helpful. So and as far as the advocacy work, I think that.
And John, that's really wonderful. And I have to say, you make a speech therapist's heart just swoon with hearing you talk about practicing your functional phrases and getting the decibel reader on your phone. So that's really exciting. And I'm really glad that you're continuing to practice those exercises. Good for you. And so,
but the last lineup is the last thing you have in your life when you have Parkinson's. You can't communicate, whether you have a care partner or not. That's going to be your last hope. So you better work on it now.
Absolutely. And communication is the key to all of us. So let's, really keep that in the forefront as we move forward here, and knowing that that is each of our goals in life, is to be able to be heard and be understood, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Very important to make sure that your needs and your ideas are met. So I'd like to take a few more minutes here, and I'm going to focus on JM and Heidi a little bit, and then Kathleen and John, I'll come back to you guys and focus on you in a few minutes. So JM, thank you very much for sharing what you've done in the past, and I'd really like to just ask you, how have you and Heidi really focused on being advocates for each other and learning how to communicate to each other and then to your medical professionals and others?
Well, I think for the first 5 years, because I isolated so much, I was in the entertainment industry. I was afraid that people would say, oh, he's got Parkinson's, he's done. And, I wasn't Michael J. Fox, although I'm as good looking as he is. I just wasn't him. But what I realized was I isolated from her. And we had some pretty difficult conversations, and we still do to these days. But what was interesting is I learned from her that if I don't care about myself, how can she care for me? Because anything she does for me is just going to fall by the wayside if I don't push myself. And she came down one morning after like 4 or 5 years and said, I had this thought that Parkinson's was a gift. And I looked at her like, are you blanking kidding me? This is a death sentence. And she said, well, that's the way you look at it. And if you look at it that way, it will be. And I realized that you know, and she brought me into meditation, and she brought me into, you know, her exercise world, which I, you know, was like minimal exercise. I would consider walking to the refrigerator a walk. But I learned that consciously, and you talked about it in your slide presentation, Michelle, that everything that I need to do, I can do consciously. That Parkinson's is affecting the memory, the things that I learned when I was a child. So I have to kind of relearn them and redo them. And, you know, we now take these walks where it's a very specific pace, and she walks with me, and she just kind of is like off my right shoulder, you know, keep your head up, you know, watch your gait. And you'd be amazed at how much just that focus, I literally feel better. I mean, I'm right now, I'm a little dyskinetic and little parts of my body ache. But if I go and do that fast walking, it's like I mean, it's like I don't have Parkinson's for that moment of time.
Right.
And you know, it's the same thing with neuroboxing. When I go in there, however I show up, once you go through that hour and a half of working out, and we train like we're fighters, we just don't punch each other.
Yeah.
You know, because it's just that you start to focus on the exercises, and Josh and Jennifer keep your mind working as well as your body, because there are some exercises that are great, but you know, your mind can kind of check out. Jogging, for example, like if you've run for what you're thinking about, all the other things you're doing, you're not thinking about jogging. Well, Parkinson's patient needs to think about jogging.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I realized that that's the best care that she could give me, because I still work and I still have a career, and, you know, I drive and I go about doing everything that I normally do. But she keeps me realizing that there's so much that I can do rather than wallowing in what I can no longer do.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's really, really important information there. And, you know, Heidi, I just want to kind of highlight there, JM mentioned that you're kind of on his shoulder and cueing him to take big steps or bring his shoulders up. That's a hard thing for people, a lot of people with Parkinson's and their care partners. How have you found kind of that good space to be able to be that encourager without being that nagger?
Well,
Check back with us in a month.
yeah, that surely has been a journey.
There you go. That's a whole nother 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But
But it's a big part of communication. You know, if you know, and again, we can't trust JM's body and sensory system to always give him the feedback that you're able to give him. So how do you encourage without being critical? And when do you find those times to do both?
You know, I have to say it has been a journey. You know, you go through this, and you definitely learn skills that you didn't have when somebody, you know, close to you gets diagnosed with something. And this is a disease that, you know, is a progression over time, and it's continually changing. So I will say that there probably are times that I've gone overboard. And I think it's those times that it's the reflection on those times and seeing how JM is reacting, or maybe what that nagging, you know, if I get into that space, what that influence does to JM and the progression. Does it actually propel him forward, or wow, maybe that actually, you know, made him take a few steps back. So over time, I've had to sort of, you know, pick the times that I want to say something that, like, even that I think would be encouraging, and then have to ask myself, is that really going to be encouraging for JM? And wow, that's not a perfect space for me. And I think we're both sort of evolving in that space. I do think that the number one thing is for me to check my state. What am I bringing to this? Because if I'm getting frustrated because he's slow, or we're trying to get out the door, or even when we're on a walk and I think he could probably go further, and he probably knows he can, and then, you know, the body says something different. I really have to check in with myself at first and say, okay, is this really about me, or is this about JM? So I try to go there first. And then really just, it's communicating with your partner. You know, a lot of times I say, hey, I'm willing to do this. Are you up for this today? I can be totally quiet back here. Like, you're rocking it. You're doing great. It doesn't need to be perfect. You know, and most of the time he says, no, I want you to keep going. So, you know, so that there's that space. And then just to let myself evolve with the encouragement, and not have it be like, you know, pick up your feet or, you know, heel toe, just like, hey, let's look at the treetops, like what's going on at the tops of the trees, and just evolve my communication and my encouragement. So yeah,
yeah, I mean, she comes from a place of love all the time. I mean, there's the off time that, you know, I don't want to hear it, but, you know, the fact of where she's coming from, how she's approaching it, she's so encouraging. And to be honest with you, I wasn't the greatest guy for the first 5 or 6 years. And I still have a lot to work on, you know, my own personal emotions, let alone emotions with Parkinson's. And I think that, you know, when I talk about, we've been married for almost 24 years now. And I say, you know, I married my best friend. And I realized that it's a best friend that would stick around through thick and thin, you know, where a romantic partner or you know, whatever it may be might go, hey, you know, I didn't sign up for this. And, you know, till death do us part is right now. And so she's never kind of been like that. And I know she can be terrified, because I am, about where this is going. And I'm waiting for Sarah Osborne to call me and go, we found the cure, come over and get yours. Yeah. But, you know, the reality of it is it's important. That's, like I said earlier, it's important that you do something for yourself. And when she came to me and said, you know, I think Parkinson's is a good thing for you. And then I called Jennifer Parkinson, ironically, it's her last name, Jennifer Parkinson, who has Parkinson's and runs neuroboxing. She listened to me just rattle on for 45 minutes because I had never to that day in 5 years spoken to another person with Parkinson's. So there was nobody that I could even just go, do you ever feel like this? Or what happens when you do this? And Jennifer sat there, and then I told her the story of Heidi coming to me, you know, after like 4 or 5 years of this diagnosis and saying, this is a gift and you're supposed to do something with it. And Jennifer listened and said, oh, I know what you're supposed to do. And I said, what, how could, I've just met you, it's 45 minutes. And she goes, you're supposed to come and be an advocate for us. And it was just enough to not be absurd, but enough to go, what are you talking about? And I did it, and I've loved it ever since. And it is very frustrating. It's very frustrating with COVID that we can't all be together, but we are together in other ways. Yeah. You adapt.
Wonderful. Yes, that's really great. And what I keep hearing from both of you, again, goes back to that whole underlying principle of what is communication. It's listening and it's speaking. And you guys both seem to have a really great sense of that. And also being able to take that and know when the good time is, being able to read each other, so that you know when it's appropriate to give encouragement versus give instructions. And so continue that great work. Don't stop talking. That's really, really good. Thank you guys for sharing.
You're
welcome. So Kathleen, I'll jump over to you. I know you mentioned that you used to enjoy singing, and when you weren't able to sing, how did that make you feel, and what kinds of things did you do to compensate or to try to improve those feelings that you were maybe having after taking yourself out of that singing environment because of Parkinson's?
Well, I thought that was the appropriate thing to do because I was starting to have stumbling falls, and I was singing offline, like my eyes would twitch, and then I'd be reading from the wrong line of music and wrong hymn and stuff. So I thought that was a good thing. So I was kind of relieved for the guilt I was feeling when I left the choir. And then I worked on the other aspect of having Parkinson, which was the rock steady boxing. And I joined the Parkinson support group here and got involved on their board. And I like JM, I was doing a lot of those kind of things to get myself out of this poor me, poor my situation. But then in the meantime, lately I discovered that I cannot even finish a story without having to, my voice would trail off, and then I was like breathless, which is not usual. And I used to read a lot to my kids, and also I would volunteer to read the newspaper to the blind over the radio station here in Augusta a long time ago. And I thought maybe that's what I should go back to doing. But then now with COVID-19, I can't do any of those things. I'm living in this senior living center that we can't even go outside without being quarantined when we come back. So but my husband is very, very helpful with taking me everywhere and then helping me with around the house, because sometimes I can't even make it from one room to the next because I would freeze and I would just fall and stuff like that. So
yes, and so I would encourage you, Kathleen, because you're doing a wonderful job with technology here, and there are so many avenues out there that you could do some Zoom things, you know, whether it's joining a Zoom choir, reading to children through Zoom, you could do that as well. And also just even recording. So, you know, sitting and reading to your phone, recording yourself so that you can go back and listen to yourself and gauge, okay, I was too quiet, I need to be a little louder. But then also working with a speech pathologist, and you can also still do that through teletherapy. So you could absolutely do, like John was talking about, you could do LSVT Loud through teletherapy, and work on things within your senior living environment to help you. So I'd really like to encourage you to do those things and look into that. And I'm happy after this to help you with making contacts with people for that too.
Thank you very much. That sounds very encouraging.
Yes, it really is. It's, you know, I know COVID stinks. None of us are, you know, loving this new world we're living in right now, but it really has helped us open some doors as far as being able to reach other people and reach people in more rural areas as well. So
true. Thank you.
Yes. All right. And thank you, Kathleen. And then John, I'd like to just kind of close up our questions here with you. Share with us, if you will, how does it make you feel when you're able to be out there, whether it's through a Zoom conference or face-to-face with others, where you're helping advocate for people with Parkinson's and helping others in the community or in the legislature, wherever that might be, to understand the value of providing support for people with Parkinson's?
Well, I think that, you know, the COVID thing is going to cause a severe effect on a lot of people. And I think the most important thing is we support each other. And I found this very interesting that everybody that spoke has a unique story to tell. That's what I find so interesting about Parkinson's folks. You know, I always say, if you want to find a new best friend, go find somebody with Parkinson's, you'll make a new best friend. And I think that we all need to get together and you know, people say, well, how do I get involved? And I say, do something. That would be a start, do something. You know, there's no Dr. Google, and I think Facebook groups are okay to an extent, but, you know, they can be too overwhelming sometimes, and sometimes you get misinformation. So I think you go out and talk to a church group. You know, people say, well, what do you do? Talk to your church group. Go, you know, talk with a different support group. Just get involved. A friend of mine that I went to high school with many years ago in South Bend, Indiana, gave me a new name for Parkinson's, because I refuse to call Parkinson's a disease. I never use the word disease with Parkinson's. So Parkinson's is a condition. And they said PD equals positive and determined. That's kind of my handle. And I always try to stay positive every day. I could get up, and it's very difficult because there's a lot of days I get up, I'm not too happy. But you know, you find some of these people out here that you don't know what everybody else is doing. So I find some of the interesting I've done with people is I have some friends that have Parkinson's, a couple, and we have a 4 o'clock wellness check every day. And if I don't call her by 5:30, I'm expecting Cherokee County to be busting out my door. So I can make sure I call her by 5:30. And it's you know, there's people out there that are living a really tough life right now. So you need to get involved. Call your legislature. Tell them you support Parkinson's. Also, something that I'm involved with real quickly, and he's affiliated with the Parkinson Foundation, is Dr. Oken. His book, if you haven't read this book yet, it's the best book you'd ever buy. And there's a new group of, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering here, but initiative called PDAvengers.com. And if you look that up on the internet, they're asking you to sign the pledge, which is a petition. They want to have 50 million people by the year 2022 so that we can stand up and say, we need, 200 years has been long enough, we will be waiting for a cure. That's way too long. You know, it's been over 200 years we've been waiting. And there's a video that you can see if you look up this book. And it's back in the 80s, AIDS was not a very popular subject with people. And it was very, you know, you were ostracized if you were stood up for AIDS. And people stood up, and guess what? There's a therapy and there's a cure for AIDS today. And they were saying that people with Parkinson's are too darn, always try to be too politically correct.
Well, John, thank you very much for that. And I really like your positive and determined. And so I think that's a great segue for us to take it back over to Sarah, and she can help us through some questions that we might have from the audience. But again, looking at communication and being positive and determined.
That's great. So yeah, I'd love to take a few questions from people in our audience today. Definitely feel free to keep submitting those. If they don't get answered here, we will try to follow up with you through our helpline. So the first question is for Michelle. How can you get the person with Parkinson's to accept that there's a vocal or voice problem?
That is a very wonderful question, and it's something that we hear quite often. I think the biggest thing to do is to talk with the doctor and the neurologist, number one, and let them kind of take on some of that burden, that voice problems are something that can definitely happen. Oftentimes when a doctor says that you need some support, that can help. Once you get in the door with that speech therapist, then it's much easier after that, because we have specific measurements, as John mentioned, with that decibel meter and other things that we can do to help give them feedback so that they know where those deficits are, and then giving them some success as well can be very helpful.
Thank you for that. So the next question is for Heidi. How do I, as the care partner, know when to speak up for my person with Parkinson's, especially with doctors? Sometimes I can't see a clear line between being helpful and interrupting.
Well, wow. Will you repeat, Sarah, will you repeat the first part of the question for me?
Yeah, of course. So how do I, as the care partner, know when to speak up? I mean, do you have any sort of strategies, or you did briefly talk about sort of the guidelines that you use when you know when to speak up for your person with Parkinson's, especially with the doctors, because there's that line between being helpful and interrupting. And how do you navigate that line?
You know what, I think for the way that I've done it, I mean, I can just share from my experience, especially with going to the doctor's office. It's been helpful for JM and I to talk before we go to the doctor's office and come up with the questions that keep coming up that we want to ask, because invariably sometimes both of us forget them by the time we get there, and just communicate with each other prior to the visit. Hey, are you okay if I jump in and ask these questions? You know, if like we have them here on the pad. If you're not in a place of remembering them, is it okay if I help out? Like, how are you feeling about that today? You know, I think that's been helpful with us. Just again, it just goes, I have to say, it's going back to the communication. You know, how are you feeling about this today? Are you okay if I help out? Sometimes we've been places, and I think I say to JM, are you okay if I interrupt you here for a minute and say something? And then just listening and reading JM. Like I know him, just like most of us know our people that are, we're very close with. I can read when he's getting aggravated, or maybe when he's been embarrassed and I've overstepped my boundaries. Or, maybe if it's time to go and the conversation is running too late, and I, put a hand on his leg and, just for like, hey, let's wrap this up type thing. So it's just, again, communicating and then listening and checking in with myself, I think are the main things that I continue to evolve and go back to.
I think also, just to add a point to that, Michelle, is that, and Sarah, but is that she'll listen to things that'll go right over my head. For example, if he says, I said, what can I do other than take medication, take medication, take medication? He'll say things like, well, exercise. And I'm like, okay, well, what exercise? And he goes, one that you like. And I'm like, well, that's kind of vague, but she'll come back and say, hey, I saw this, there's a group in our area that does cycling, or there's a group that does boxing, or whatever it may be. Whereas I just heard that and shut down and, stopped to keep taking the medication. She would encourage me, even after the fact, after the week or two after the appointment, that this is something that I heard him say, and you should look into it.
Yeah, I love that everybody hears a different point in the conversation, but you work together to make sure you're getting the whole picture. I love that. JM, I do have a follow-up question for you. And also John had touched on this, but we talk about advocacy as the way to hear your voice. And so what can you tell me about what it means to be an advocate? And can you give us some ideas in addition to what John said of how you can be involved?
Well, I got involved with when I got involved with neuroboxing, I started to realize that here is a group that is doing a lot of great work, but a lot of people don't know about it. And Rocksteady had been out there and been going ahead, but the ideas and modalities were different. I realized that I can go home and, I can box for an hour and I can go home and go back to my job and just go about my life. But I'm not answering any questions that I have, because it's in the middle of the night when you're lying there going, whether you're talking to God or you're talking to the universe or whoever you're talking to, you don't understand why you have this, and it's why me. And I can't get answers from physicians all the time that give me, a feeling of like, oh, well, there's, it's the old adage, if you talk to, you talk to a bunch of Parkinson's people that are together in a group, and some have had it much longer than others, and they go, hey, we always hear there's going to be a cure in like 5 to 10 years. And then those 5 to 10 years go by, and then there's another 5 to 10 years. So it's really about finding, my advocacy is finding what is good for that day. And that's why I gravitated to PD, because it wasn't about meds. It was or research into scientific chemicals. It was really about, hey, how can we make you feel better today? And then you start to realize that all those things become fun. And like when we do the Parkinson's moving day, I just happen to luck out and have a great group of friends, a great group of resources. I'm sure some are watching right now, and they donated, and all of a sudden I went from being $0 and 100th on the list to the top, and I started to get to meet people, and I thought, wow, this is fun. You can raise money, and then you can get to meet a whole different group of people through this charity, through this organization. And it all became about becoming charitable and reading books like John showed us. By the way, John, I need to get that title from you. But, I read a book called Reverse Parkinson's, and it's a guy by the name of John Pepper, and he lives in South Africa. And his whole thing is about is retraining your brain consciously how to walk, how to pick up a wine glass if you've got a tremor and not shake, and he shows you this stuff. And it works, but people, they don't know about it because there's not enough communication about all it. And some people are trying to make a buck off you, whatever. This guy will mail you the book from South Africa for $18. And I'm sure the postage alone costs $18. So the book is free. But his whole goal was to just try to show people that this is something that he did and it worked. And I think it can work for some of you. And it's finding those types of things and getting involved and then just sharing them with people. And I'll be the first one to ask a question of a doctor. Have you heard about this? No, I haven't. Well, why not? Well, how come you're not telling everybody to go box or go, tandem bike or go do Tai Chi? Well, we have this piece of paper here. Well, it's like, well, I want to know more. So the only way I'm going to know more is to find it out myself.
Right. And I think that's a really good point, and a good segue actually into Kathleen. So thank you, Heidi and JM, both very much. I do want to ask Kathleen then. So I know you stopped singing in the choir because it became difficult to read the lines. What did you love most about singing? Talking about finding those things that we love and doing them. What did you love the most? And did you notice a stronger voice when you were in the choir?
Yes, I did. In fact, I did notice that my voice was much stronger, and I was able to read the notes. I knew where to go with the notes and how to control my voice. That was wonderful, the feeling. It's like a type of a skill that you kind of had, but it's not there anymore. It's like I cannot be sure where I'm going with that note anymore. And when and it's like right now, it's just sinking right now. And so when I have to lift my head and think with my head, with my brains, how to put that note in the right place. I have to think really hard to figure out how to put that note in the right place now. So that was the thing that made me feel like I shouldn't be there anymore. So I think singing is a very, very, very fantastic outlet for the voice practice as well as for self-expression.
Yeah.
But I need to find an avenue to get back to it that is acceptable, that is possible.
Yeah, I love that you're looking for that. I love that you are still wanting to do that and to find new ways in the wake of COVID to continue doing that.
It's a
things
happy
that you
thing.
love. Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so we're down to our final question. I wish we had some more time, but again, do call the helpline, engage with us if you have more questions. The last question is for Michelle. What are some suggestions for those who are struggling to communicate and keep their voice strong during COVID, whether it's because they live alone, whether it's because they have trouble talking with the mask on, standing 6 feet apart? What suggestions do you have?
So number one, I would say just what JM mentioned is find something that you love. Find that person that you love having that conversation with and make the effort to reach out to them. Another thing that John mentioned that I thought was wonderful is have those wellness calls. Have somebody that if they don't hear from you every day or every week, that you have these set times that they contact you to help encourage you, knowing that apathy can get in the way. Have that backup to get involved. And again, talk with your physician about your concerns, because now teletherapy is so prominent that we can do most anything, anywhere to help you with that voice. So just do what these people on this call are doing and be your own best advocate. Be strong, reach out, and get to that doctor to have them help you get that support.
Thank you. That's a perfect closing thought. So that concludes today's program. I want to thank Michelle, JM, Heidi, Kathleen, and John. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this information. Today's session has been recorded and will be archived on the Parkinson's Foundation website, which is parkinson.org, and then you would go to /PD Health. So you can also find information about all of our upcoming programs. And again, if you had a question today that wasn't answered, go ahead and reach out to our helpline. Visit parkinson.org. We do have our educational book series, webinars, our hospital safety kit. You can learn all about these resources and our virtual events at parkinson.org or call the helpline at 1-800-4PD-INFO. Last but not least, remember to join us next week. We do these every week for Care Partner Town Hall, Strategies for Effective Communication. And until then, thank you for joining us and continue to stay well.